Today's story is so emotional, it proves one truth of the Old West. Some meetings are accidents, but others are unavoidable. This is the frontier at its most brutal. Frozen passes, raiding shadows, and a single glance that defies generations of hatred. It all started with one stolen herd, small in scale, yet powerful enough to awaken a love that would challenge war itself. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The winter of 1875 crept into the Sangre de Cristo Mountains like a hunter closing in. Quiet, unavoidable, without mercy. Snow poured down in heavy sheets, reshaping the raw New Mexico high country into something breathtaking and lethal at the same time. The mountains jutted upward like broken blades beneath a dull gray sky. Their pine-covered slopes bowed under ice and fresh snow. The wind tore through narrow canyons, sharp with the smell of frozen soil, and a simple truth: only the strongest would live to see spring. These mountains had been home to the Apache for longer than memory could measure. They knew every cut in the stone, every hidden seep of water, every narrow trail threading through land that could end a white man's life before nightfall. They moved across this unforgiving ground like living shadows, leaving no sign, taking only what survival demanded, existing in balance with a land that punished arrogance. Rune stood at the edge of a granite shelf, his dark gaze locked on the valley below with the sharp focus of a hunting hawk. At 28 winters, he was young to command a war band, yet no one challenged his right to lead. His father had been a feared war chief, his grandfather a legend whose name still carried weight around Apache fires. Among his people, leadership was not passed down like a title in the white man's world. It was claimed through resolve, judgment, and an unbreakable devotion to freedom. The cold gnawed at exposed skin, but Rune barely felt it. Since boyhood, he had trained himself to endure far worse than winter's bite. His long black hair, braided with leather and marked by a single eagle feather, fell down his back. Buckskin and layered fur shielded his body while allowing swift movement in air cold enough to steal a man's breath. His face was carved in hard lines, high cheekbones, a firm jaw, a proud nose. His eyes were the most striking, dark as obsidian, yet capable of warmth or violence depending on what the moment demanded. 15 of his finest warriors waited nearby in absolute stillness, pale breath drifting from their mouths. These men had followed him through trials that should have ended them all. They knew today was not about honor or bloodshed. It was about living through winter. Jain, his closest companion since childhood, stepped quietly to his side. At 30, Jain carried a jagged scar from brow to jaw, a reminder of the grizzly that nearly killed him years earlier. Broad and powerful, where Rune was lean and fast, the two balanced each other in both combat and counsel. The herds drifting toward the canyon, just like you said, Jain murmured, breath fogging the air. Rune gave a slow nod, eyes never leaving the valley. The Crow Ranch, one of the largest cattle holdings in the territory, sprawled across land that had once fed Apache hunters. Halric Crow was a man who took without asking, convinced that money and influence placed him above law and decency alike. Over 5 years, his cattle had ruined water sources the Apache had depended on for generations. His iron spur men had already killed 2 of Rune's people, men hunting deer on ancestral ground, long before any white claim existed. Reservation agents offered spoiled flour and rotten beef in exchange for surrender and confinement. Rune had seen what those places did to his people. He had watched pride drain from their eyes. He chose another road, one of constant movement, endless alertness, and the knowledge that every sunrise might be his last. But it was a road of freedom, and freedom was worth any cost. "We move when the sun touches the western peaks," Rune said, his voice calm and absolute. "We take only what we need to last the winter. No blood unless they force it. Our aim is the cattle, nothing else. Do you understand?" Low voices answered in agreement. They had heard these words before. They knew he meant them. Rune did not kill for pleasure or revenge. He did what survival required. No more, no less. As the sun dipped lower, casting gold and red across the snow, something shifted in the air. Rune felt it instantly. A warning. A change he could not yet name. His fingers brushed the medicine pouch at his chest. "Brother?" Jean asked quietly. "What troubles you?" "I don't know," Rune said, still watching the valley. "But after today, nothing will be the same." He had no idea how true that was. Marabel Crow had never cared much for Santa Fe's winter social season. The endless dances, the forced smiles, the way young women were evaluated like livestock. This year, the whole performance made her skin crawl. At 23, she was already being whispered about as dangerously close to spinsterhood, a fact her father reminded her of with growing irritation. The problem was simple. Marabel refused to become anyone's ornament. She had turned down 5 proposals in 2 years, each rejection sharpening Halric Crow's temper. He had built his empire from nothing and expected his daughter to secure it through marriage. Instead, Marabel read forbidden books, asked questions no lady was meant to ask, and dreamed of a life that belonged to her alone. The problem, at its core, was painfully simple. Marabel Crow had no desire to become a decoration on any man's arm, no matter how rich or influential he might be. Over the past 2 years, she had turned away 5 proposals, each refusal sending her father's temper climbing higher. Halric Crow had carved his cattle empire out of nothing, rising from obscurity to become one of the most powerful men in the territory through raw determination and merciless business sense. He expected his only daughter to lock that power in place with a calculated marriage, ideally to one of the territory's elite families, men whose fortunes rested on silver or banking interests stretching as far as San Francisco. Instead, Marabel buried herself in books her father deemed improper for a woman: philosophy, political theory, even scientific journals that challenged the world as he understood it. At dinner gatherings, she voiced opinions that made his associates shift uncomfortably in their chairs. She insisted on learning every detail of the ranch, riding out with the foreman, studying the herds, asking questions that implied she could manage the operation as well as any man. "You're too headstrong," her father had snapped that very morning, his face flushing to the dangerous shade that warned of an approaching rage. "You think you can run a ranch? You think you understand business better than men who've spent their lives at it? You're a woman, Marabel. Your duty is to marry well, keep a household, and provide heirs. That's what society asks, and it's more than fair." The argument had spiraled until Marabel, unwilling to endure another second of his rule, stormed from the house and ordered the hands to saddle Tempest for a ride toward the northern pastures. Still seething, Halric agreed, perhaps hoping the cold wind and hard miles might break her stubborn will. Now, as the winter sun slid toward the western peaks, Marabel found herself near the canyon lands, wrapped in a heavy wool coat trimmed with fox fur. Her pale hair was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat as she rode Tempest, her spirited gray mare and most treasured companion since her 16th birthday. 4 seasoned riders flanked her. Varn Ellison, a hardened former cavalry scout whose scarred face told stories of decades in brutal country. Orrin Pike, once enslaved, now recognized as the finest horseman in the territory. And 2 younger hands, Cobb Harker and Lyle Mercer, both hungry to prove themselves. For the past hour, Varn had urged her to turn back. "Miss Marabel, daylight's slipping fast, and this close to the high country." He hesitated, uneasy. There's been talk of trouble out here. I don't want to alarm you, but your father would skin me alive if anything happened." She knew he spoke the truth. The sensible choice was to wheel Tempest toward home before darkness settled in. Yet the raw beauty of the winter land held her in place, the way dying sunlight painted the snow-covered peaks in soft rose and gold. The silence was vast, broken only by wind whispering through pine needles and the harsh cry of a raven overhead. The emptiness felt honest, far removed from the suffocating parlors of Santa Fe. Out here, she could breathe. Out here, she could exist as herself, not as a prized daughter or a future bride. The feeling thrilled and unsettled her all at once. "Just a few more minutes," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the mountains. "It's beautiful up here, so peaceful." The word had barely left her mouth when the sound reached them. Hooves pounding in the distance, men shouting, chaos rolling up from the valley below. "The herd!" Oren shouted, his hand flying to the rifle at his saddle. "Someone scattering the cattle." Varn drew his weapon, scanning the terrain with a soldier's eye. "Raiders. Miss Marabel, you need to head back now. We'll deal with this." Before she could answer, Tempest reared as gunfire cracked through the cold air like splitting ice. The mare's eyes flashed white with fear, and suddenly Marabel was fighting for control as Tempest lunged forward, toward the noise instead of away. The men spurred their horses, shouting for her to turn back, but their voices vanished into wind, gunshots, and thunderous hooves. She should have been terrified. Every instinct should have driven her to flee. Yet something wild and unyielding inside her, the same force that had never bowed to society's narrow rules, pushed her onward. What she saw next shattered everything she thought she knew. The Ashwind kin moved through the chaos like living shadows, their coordination turning violence into something almost fluid. They guided the cattle toward the mountain passes with skill that made her father's men look clumsy by comparison. The ranch guards fired wildly, panic obvious even from afar, and then she saw him. He sat astride a striking paint horse, black and white markings stark against the snow. Even at a distance, authority radiated from him. The way horse and rider moved as one, the smallest gestures commanding instant obedience. He seemed less a man within the land than a part of it. Across the storm of snow and smoke, their eyes met. The noise faded. Time slowed. The world narrowed until nothing existed but those dark eyes locked with hers. Marabel Crow had never put faith in instant recognition, never believed the romantic idea that two people could know each other in a single glance. She had read such notions in novels and dismissed them as fantasy, inventions of writers untouched by real desire. Yet when those dark, obsidian eyes locked onto hers through swirling snow and gun smoke, something deep inside her shifted, sharp and undeniable. It felt as if her heart had been waiting its entire life for that exact moment, as though a hidden part of her suddenly recognized what it had always been missing. Across the distance, she saw the Ashwind kin leader's eyes widen slightly. Even from afar, she caught the flicker of surprise, of recognition, something dangerously close to awe. Then his expression hardened into focus. Purpose took over. He drove his horse forward, straight toward her. Fear surged through Marabel like ice flooding her veins, shattering the strange stillness that had held her frozen. She spun Tempest around and drove the mare into a desperate gallop, tearing across uneven, snow-choked ground as her heart slammed violently against her ribs. Behind her came the pounding thunder of hooves. She could feel him gaining ground with terrifying ease. The snow betrayed her. Beneath the white surface lay hidden ice and broken stone. Tempest's hooves struck a frozen stream concealed by powder, and the world tipped violently. Marabel was thrown hard into the snow, the breath ripped from her lungs in a sharp, painful gasp. Her rifle flew free from its scabbard, skidding several feet away. She clawed toward it, hands clumsy in thick gloves, panic and cold robbing her of coordination. She was inches from the weapon when a shadow swallowed her. Rune dismounted with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for a man of his size. He moved like a striking animal, swift, precise, kicking the rifle aside before she could touch it. In one smooth motion, he pressed her back into the snow, his weight pinning her down. His hands closed around her shoulders, unyielding but controlled. He restrained her without cruelty, holding her firmly in place. Marabel struggled instinctively, breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps that had nothing to do with the fall. She was acutely aware of every place their bodies met, of the solid weight above her, of his long black hair falling forward to curtain them off from the rest of the world. Up close, every detail of his face burned into her mind. The hard line of his jaw, the high cheekbones carved by heritage, the proud set of his nose, the depth in his eyes that seemed endless. The thought struck her without warning and with shocking force. He was beautiful, not in the polished, practiced way of the men who courted her in Santa Fe, but in the raw, dangerous way wild things were beautiful. Untamed, fierce, magnificent. They stared at each other, breath mingling in pale clouds between them as snow drifted softly down. It settled in her golden hair, clung to his dark lashes, sealing them in a moment of impossible intimacy amid chaos. The sounds of the raid faded, as if the world itself had narrowed to this single instant. Above her, Rune felt his world tilt. She was more beautiful than sunrise over sacred peaks, more striking than anything he had imagined. Her eyes, blue as summer sky, were wide with fear, defiance, and something else that reached past thought and reason straight into him. Strands of her pale hair had slipped loose, framing a face that seemed to belong to another life entirely. A softer world. A world that should have been foreign to him. Yet it wasn't her appearance that struck him hardest. It was the fire in her gaze. The spirit that refused to break even as fear trembled through her. She met his eyes without begging, without crying out, without surrendering a shred of dignity, despite being utterly at his mercy. In that breathless instant, Rune knew with terrible certainty that his life had just changed forever. This woman, this enemy, this impossible presence, was bound to his fate. The realization terrified him more than any battle ever had. He felt her heart racing beneath his hands, saw the quick flutter of her pulse at her throat. Her lips were parted as she struggled for air, and for one reckless moment he wondered what they would taste like. The thought startled him so badly that he released her at once, stepping back as if burned. The absence of her warmth felt like a wound. Rune forced distance between them, reminding himself who he was and why he was there. Marabel scrambled to her feet, never breaking eye contact. For a long, charged moment, they simply stood there, something unspoken crackling in the space between them, more dangerous than gunfire. Then Marabel turned and ran. Rune let her go. Every instinct screamed at him to pursue, to claim what some ancient part of him recognized as his own. But he stayed where he was, watching as she fled through the snow toward the distant ranch buildings, her pale hair streaming behind her like a banner. Jayan appeared at his side, scarred face tight with concern. "Brother, are you hurt? Did she strike you?" "No," Rune said quietly, eyes still fixed on the horizon where Marabel vanished. "But I will never be the same. We should leave. We have what we came for. The white men's guns are closing in." Rune nodded slowly. He mounted his horse and led the Ashwind kin back into the mountains, driving 200 head of stolen cattle ahead of them. Yet one thought echoed through his mind like a steady drumbeat. She would be his, not by force, not by capture, but by something far more powerful, something that frightened him more than any enemy ever had. She would be his because she was meant to be. Because in the instant their eyes met, he had seen his future written clearly in the depths of her blue gaze. The Apache did not believe in the white man's idea of fate, but Rune knew, beyond doubt, that destiny had just found him. They believed in freedom, in choice, in the strength of will to carve one's own road. Yet Rune could not deny what had passed through him when he met her gaze, when he held her in the snow and felt her heart hammer beneath his palm. She was bound to him by something older than words, and he would wait. Days, months, even years, until she understood it too. Marabel Crow barely recalled the ride back to the ranch. Varn Ellison and the others eventually found her, their faces tight with fear that eased only when they saw she was unharmed. Nearly 200 head of cattle were gone, taken cleanly in the raid, but no one lay dead or broken. The raiders dissolved into the mountains like mist, leaving tracks the falling snow would soon swallow. Her father was incandescent when she returned, clothes disordered, color drained from her face. Halric Crow paced the grand parlor like a trapped animal, his voice rising as he railed against lawlessness and the territorial governor's refusal to send more troops to crush the Apache threat. "This is exactly why I forbade you from riding north," he thundered, slamming a fist onto the mahogany desk hard enough to rattle the crystal decanters. "Those savages could have killed you, or worse. Do you have any idea what they do to white women they take?" Marabel sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket a servant had placed over her shoulders, and said nothing. She could still feel the weight of the Apache leader's hands, still see the intensity in his eyes. Her heart had not slowed since the moment he released her. What frightened her most was not that he had captured her, but that, in the breathless instant before he stepped back, a treacherous part of her had wished he wouldn't. "Marabel, are you listening?" Her father's stare was sharp with exasperation, and perhaps a flicker of concern, if he was capable of it. "I'm sorry, Father," she said faintly. "What did you say?" "I said I'm hiring more guns," Halric snapped. "Professionals from Texas, men who won't hesitate to do what must be done." His eyes narrowed. "And you will not ride north again. Is that clear?" She nodded, though his words slid past her. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Dark eyes, strong hands, a connection that made no sense and refused to be ignored. That night she lay awake beneath silk sheets and hand-stitched quilts, staring at the ornate ceiling. Sleep would not come. She saw his face again and again, felt the strange charge between them. It was madness. He was Apache, her people's enemy, a raider who had just stolen her father's cattle. By every rule she knew, she should have been terrified. Grateful he let her go, certain she never wanted to see him again. And yet all she could think about was what might have happened if the moment had lasted just a heartbeat longer. Weeks passed. Winter deepened, storms closing roads and keeping most people indoors. Marabel had always loved winter. The hush of fresh snow, the comfort of fires and warm drinks, long hours with a book. This year, restlessness gnawed at her. She snapped at servants, quarreled with her father, and found she could not focus on even her favorite novels. She told herself it was cabin fever. She refused to admit the truth, that she watched the horizon, waiting for something she could not name. Halric kept his promise. More guns arrived. Hard men from Texas and Arizona, pistols worn low, voices soft and dangerous. They patrolled the boundaries, set traps in the passes, and spoke of killing Apache as if discussing vermin. Their presence unsettled her deeply. She had been raised to see the Apache as violent savages, but she had looked into their leader's eyes and found intelligence, pride, honor, and something that stirred a part of her she hadn't known existed. When the weather finally broke after a brutal storm, Marabel could bear confinement no longer. She rose before dawn, dressed in her warmest riding clothes, slipped out before questions could be asked, saddled Tempest herself, and rode into the pearl-gray morning toward the high country. She told herself she craved fresh air and open land. She did not admit she was searching for him. The sun climbed as she reached a pine-ringed clearing, branches heavy with snow. The ground lay untouched save for delicate tracks of deer and rabbit. She dismounted, walked to the trees, and breathed in cold, clean air. Something eased in her chest for the first time in weeks. "You should not be here alone." Marabel spun so fast she nearly fell, her heart leaping into her throat. He stood at the edge of the trees, as still as the pines themselves, as if drawn from her waking dreams. Buckskin and fur guarded him from the cold, his presence quiet and unmistakable, his gaze fixed on her as the snow whispered down. His long black hair hung loose around his shoulders, falling past his shoulder blades in a dark curtain that caught the pale morning light. In the clean winter sun, he looked like something pulled from legend, too wild to belong to her ordered world, too striking to be real. Marabel Crow's first instinct was to run, to vault onto Tempest and race back toward the ranch and its illusion of safety. Yet her boots stayed rooted to the frozen ground, and her gaze refused to leave his face. "I could say the same to you," she replied, startled by how steady her voice sounded despite her heart pounding against her ribs. "This is Crow land." A flicker of something close to amusement crossed his features, softening the hard planes of his face. "This land was my people's long before any Crow set foot on it," he said calmly. "We do not recognize fences or words written on paper." He moved closer, steps so quiet she could not hear them, even in the perfect stillness of the clearing. Marabel's hand drifted toward the small pistol tucked into her coat pocket. But she didn't draw it. Some instinct told her it would be useless. He could close the distance and disarm her before she ever squeezed the trigger. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked, hating the tremor that crept into the last word. Rune stopped a few feet away, close enough for her to see the faint flush cold had brought to his bronze skin. The golden flecks in his dark eyes she hadn't noticed before. The fine lines at their corners that hinted he laughed more than his severity suggested. "If I wanted you dead," he said quietly, his voice deeper than she remembered, edged with a roughness that sent a shiver through her, "you would not have left that battlefield 3 weeks ago." "I did not come here to harm you." "Then why did you come?" The question lingered between them, heavy with meaning neither dared examine too closely. Rune's gaze never left her face, and Marabel felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. "I have watched the horizon every day since we met," he said at last, his voice low and intense enough to steal her breath. "Hoping to see you ride out, hoping for one more chance to look at you. When I saw you leave your ranch this morning, I followed. I should not have. It goes against everything I know to be wise." He paused. "But I could not stop myself." Her breath caught. No man had ever spoken to her with such blunt honesty, such exposed vulnerability. "You've been watching me," she whispered. "Yes." No apology, no shame. Just truth, offered without disguise. "Why?" Rune stepped closer still, close enough that she caught the scent of pine smoke, leather, and something wild she could not name. "Because from the moment I looked into your eyes, you have followed me," he said, each word deliberate. "I see your face when I close my eyes at night. I have never believed in the white man's God, or in fate written among the stars. But when I held you in the snow, I knew You were meant to be part of my life. That moment changed something in me that cannot be undone." Tears burned at the corners of Marabel's eyes. She should have been frightened. She should have been furious at his certainty. Instead, something deep within her recognized the truth in his words, felt her own spirit reaching for his like a flower turning toward the sun. "This is impossible," she said, her voice breaking. "You know it is. We can't. There's no way." "I know," Rune said softly. "My father would kill you if he knew you were this close to me," she pressed on. "His iron spurmen are hunting for excuses to slaughter your people." "I know. Our people are at war," she said. "They have been for generations. There is blood and hatred between us stretching back hundreds of years." "I know." "Then why are we standing here?" she whispered, talking as if any of this could be real, as if there could be a future for— Her words failed her. Rune lifted his hand slowly, giving her every chance to step away. When she didn't, when she stood frozen, barely breathing, eyes locked on his, he touched her cheek. His fingers were rough and warm against her cold skin, calloused by years of hard living, yet the touch itself was impossibly gentle. Marabel's breath shuddered. "Because some things are stronger than war," he said quietly, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with reverent care. "Stronger than hatred. Stronger than all the sensible reasons this should never be. Because I looked into your eyes and saw my future, and now I cannot unsee it. I cannot return to the man I was before I knew you existed." Marabel closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every rational thought urging her to flee. When she opened them, he was watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. Longing, tenderness, and something close to pain woven together. "I don't even know your name," she whispered. "Rune," he answered. "It means one who runs swiftly." Then, softly, "And you are Marabel. I heard your men call for you during the raid." "Rune," she repeated, testing the unfamiliar sound, surprised by how beautiful it felt on her tongue. "We shouldn't be here together. This is dangerous for both of us." "Yes," he agreed quietly. "We should not." "I should return before someone notices I'm gone." "Yes," he said again. "You should." Yet neither of them moved. They remained in the clearing as the sun climbed higher, winter light filtering through the pines, scattering bands of gold and shadow across the snow. The world seemed to shrink until only the two of them existed, caught in a moment suspended beyond consequence. "Will I see you again?" Marabel Crow asked, hating the need she heard in her own voice. Rune's thumb traced her cheekbone one last time before his hand fell away, though the cost of breaking contact was clear in his eyes. "Do you want to?" "I don't know what I want," Marabel admitted, her voice stripped bare. "All I know is I haven't stopped thinking about you since that day. I've been searching for you without admitting it to myself. Standing here with you feels more real, more right than anything else in my life, and that terrifies me." "Then we are the same," Rune said softly. The warmth and understanding in his voice tightened her chest. "You have become the center of my world, and I do not know if that is a blessing or a curse." "Maybe it's both," Marabel whispered, managing a trembling smile. "I think you're right." "It is both," he said, and then he smiled. It was a real smile, one that transformed his face completely, softening its hard lines, making him look younger and somehow even more devastatingly handsome. They talked as though time no longer mattered. Marabel learned that Rune had never wanted to be a warrior. As a boy, he had dreamed of becoming a healer, learning the plants and animals of the mountains from his grandmother, who carried the old medicine ways. But war had chosen him, His father had been killed by soldiers when Rune was 16, and the burden of protecting his people had fallen on his shoulders because there was no one else left to carry it. She told him about her mother, who had died when Marabel was 12, leaving her alone in a house full of men who expected her to be silent and ornamental. She spoke of the books she read in secret, the dreams she carried of a life beyond society's narrow rules for women, the constant feeling of living in a cage, even if its bars were made of silk and gold. "You are like a wild horse," Rune said, studying her with an intensity that left her feeling exposed and seen. "Beautiful and strong, but trapped in a pen far too small for your spirit. You were meant to run free." Marabel laughed, though it sounded dangerously close to a sob. "That's exactly what I am, a wild horse in a gilded stable." "Wild horses are meant to run," he said gently, "to feel the wind in their manes and the earth beneath their hooves, to choose their own path." "And you?" she asked, searching his face. "Are you free?" Rune's gaze drifted beyond the clearing. "I am free in ways your people would never understand," he said. "But I am also bound, by responsibility, by lives that depend on my choices. True freedom? I do not know if it exists for anyone. We are all bound to something: duty, love, honor, survival." When Marabel finally mounted Tempest to return to the ranch, Rune caught her hand, his fingers warm despite the cold. "Will you meet me here again?" he asked, his expression open, hopeful. "Tomorrow, when the sun stands highest." She knew she should say no. Every stolen moment was a betrayal of her father, Halric Crow, her people, everything she had been taught to believe. But when she looked into Rune's eyes, all of that faded beneath something far stronger. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll be here." His smile was like sunlight breaking through cloud. He pressed her gloved hand to his lips, a tender, unexpected gesture, then released her. Marabel rode back to the ranch, dazed, her thoughts spinning. She was falling in love with a man who should be her enemy. She was risking everything for hidden moments no one could see, and she did not care. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own path, and that path led straight to Rune. Over the next 2 weeks, they met in secret nearly every day, always changing locations to avoid discovery. Sometimes the original clearing, sometimes a hidden canyon warmed by a hot spring, even in deep winter. Once beside a frozen waterfall that glittered like diamonds in the sun. They spoke of everything and nothing. Rune taught her words from his language, laughing at her pronunciation without ever mocking her. She read passages from her favorite books, watching his face as he listened with full attention, asking questions that showed he understood not just the words, but their meaning. They learned each other's lives with the hunger of souls long starved for real connection. Marabel spoke of wealth without belonging, of abandoned dreams, of being molded into something she was never meant to be. Rune shared stories of the mountains, of tracking deer with his father, of a childhood shaped by land, loss, and duty. He spoke of the grandmother who had taught him the ways of plants and healing, of the single moment when everything shifted, and he was forced to become a warrior instead of following the life he had once imagined. With every meeting, the pull between them intensified, sharp and alive, like thunder gathering before a storm. It lived in glances that lingered a heartbeat too long, in brushes of skin that sent heat racing through their veins, in heavy silences where their eyes locked and neither could turn away. Yet Rune never pressed, never asked for more than Marabel Crow was ready to give. He treated her with a gentleness and respect that drew her deeper each day, each hour, each stolen moment. One afternoon, as they sat beside a small fire Rune had built against the cutting cold, Marabel noticed the scars on his hands, pale lines etched across bronze skin. "How did you get these?" she asked, tracing one scar with her fingertip, startled by how such a simple touch made her pulse leap. Rune glanced down at their joined hands, his thumbs moving slowly over her knuckles. "Many winters ago," he said, "when I was young and foolish, 14, maybe 15, I fought a mountain lion that stalked our camp, threatening the children. I survived. Barely." He studied the scars. "They remind me that courage and stupidity are often the same thing. The difference is whether you live or die." Marabel smiled, despite herself. "You're not stupid. Brave, reckless, perhaps, but not stupid." Rune lifted an eyebrow, a flicker of humor in his eyes. "Then what do you call a man who risks everything, his safety, his people, his life, to meet a woman he can never truly have? A woman whose world and his can never stand together?" The words settled heavily between them, dragging reality back into the light. Marabel's smile faded as the truth crashed over her. "Rune," she whispered, tears threatening, "what are we doing? Where can this possibly lead? We're living inside a dream, but dreams end." He turned fully toward her, eyes fierce in the firelight, his hands rising to cradle her face with infinite care. "I don't know where it leads," he admitted, voice rough with feeling. "I only know that with you I feel whole. You make me want to believe in a future where our peoples are not enemies, where love can cross any divide, where we build instead of destroy." "But love isn't enough," Marabel said, tears spilling freely now. "Not in this world. My father, Halric Crow, would never accept you. Your people would never accept me. There are laws, hatred, centuries of blood between us. How can love be stronger than all of that?" Rune brushed her tears away, his touch reverent, as though she might shatter if handled carelessly. "Then perhaps we must make our own world," he said softly, "one with room for both of us, beyond the reach of old hatred." "How?" she asked. "Where would we go?" "I don't have every answer," he said, frustration and pain cutting through his words. "But I know this. I would rather die free with you than live without you. If you asked me to leave everything I know, I would. For you, I would do anything. Go anywhere. Become anyone." His honesty broke something open in her chest. "I can't ask that," she whispered. "Your people need you. You're their leader, their shield. I can't be the reason you abandon them." "You don't have to ask," Rune said, resting his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. "I offer it freely. A man cannot lead with a heart torn in two. Without you, I would become hollow, and a hollow man helps no one." She kissed him then, unable to hold back any longer, pouring everything she could not say into that single act. It was her first kiss, and it was perfect. Tender and urgent, gentle and aching, filled with promise and sorrow all at once. Rune answered with a hunger that matched her own, his arms closing around her, erasing the space between them. He kissed her like a man parched who had finally found water, like she was the breath he needed to live, like she was everything he had never believed he could claim. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Marabel felt a flame despite the winter chill. She had never imagined a kiss could do this, could make her feel weightless and burning and overwhelmed all at once. "Goodness gracious," she breathed, fingers pressed to her lips, as if she could hold the sensation there forever. Rune laughed softly, rich and warm. "Is that a good thing?" "I don't know," Marabel admitted honestly, her body still trembling. "I've never felt anything like that. It's powerful, almost frightening." His expression grew serious, tender. "Do you want more?" She met his gaze and saw her own longing reflected there, saw the restraint it cost him to let her choose the pace. "Yes," she whispered, the word rising from somewhere deep and newly awakened. "I want more. I want everything." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Marabel Crow gave herself over to the feeling without resistance. In Rune's arms, the impossible felt within reach. In his arms, she could believe, just for a while, that love might truly be strong enough. In his arms, she was finally free. But freedom could never last. Marabel had known that from the beginning. Still, she had let herself hope they might have more time, that their stolen moments could stretch on forever. She had been careful, or so she believed. She changed the hours of her rides, never stayed away too long, always returned with reasonable explanations about trails explored or places wandered. What she underestimated were two things: her father's web of informants and the sharp suspicions of the iron spur men who prowled the ranch boundaries with predatory patience. One of them, a lean, cruel-faced man with rattlesnake eyes named Soren Black, followed her to one of her meetings with Rune. Hidden from view, he watched as they kissed, as they clung to one another with desperate tenderness, as they spoke words of love that would have been called treason by both their worlds. Soren Black took his discovery straight to Halric Crow, delivering it with barely concealed pleasure, the kind born from witnessing another's ruin. Marabel was in the stables, brushing Tempest and replaying Rune's promise to meet her the next day, when her father burst in. Soren Black at his side, 3 other hired guns close behind. The rage on Halric Crow's face froze her blood. "How could you?" he thundered, his voice echoing through the stable, setting the horses shifting in alarm. "How could you betray your own people? Betray everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed, everything your mother and I gave to secure this life for you?" Marabel's heart plunged, but she kept her voice steady as she turned. "I don't know what you mean, Father. Don't you dare lie to me!" He seized her arm, his grip bruising, his fingers biting deep. "Soren Black saw you with that Apache savage, saw you kissing him like some back-alley whore in Santa Fe." She tore her arm free, years of restraint boiling over. "He is not a savage," she shot back. "His name is Rune, and he is more honorable, more decent than any man you've ever tried to force on me." The slap came hard and fast. Her head snapped to the side, her lips split, blood flooding her mouth. She tasted it and refused to cry. "You will never see him again," Halric Crow said, his voice shaking with a fury that radiated heat. "You will remain under guard until I arrange a marriage to salvage what little reputation you have left." Then he turned to Soren Black, his eyes gleaming with malice. "As for your Apache lover, I want him dead, his entire band dead. $5,000 cash to the man who brings me his scalp." "No!" Marabel lunged for him, but the hired guns seized her arms, holding her fast as she struggled. "Please, Father, please don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll marry whoever you choose. Just don't hurt him. Please." Halric Crow looked at her with utter contempt. "You're pathetic," he said coldly, "debasing yourself for a savage. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become." He left her there, sobbing as the hired guns dragged her back to the house, locking her inside her room. Marabel threw herself against the door, screaming, pounding until her throat burned and her hands ached. But it was useless. Solid oak. A new lock. No rescue coming. She had to warn Rune. She had to tell him that a bounty had been placed on his head, that professional killers were already hunting him and the Ashwind kin. But the windows had been barred with iron while she was in the stable. Guards stood watch in the hall. Her father had planned everything. She paced like a trapped animal, mind racing through desperate schemes, climbing despite the bars, overpowering armed guards, even setting her room ablaze. Every idea ended in failure. With each passing hour, her panic sharpened. The next day crawled by. Then another. Rune would be waiting. He would wonder why she hadn't come. Would he think she'd abandoned him? Worse, would he come closer to the ranch, straight into the trap? The thought made her sick. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She only paced and prayed to anything that might be listening to keep him alive. On the third night, salvation came from the last place she expected. In the deep quiet, when even the guards struggled to stay awake, a soft tap came at her window. Marabel rushed forward and found Orrin Pike outside, the freed man from the stables, the one who had always treated her with kindness, the one risking everything, clinging to a rope at her second-story window. "Miss Marabel," he whispered urgently, worry etched into his face. "I can't get you out. Too many guards and those bars won't budge. But I can get a message to him, if you tell me where." Relief nearly brought her to her knees. With shaking hands, she tore a page from one of her books and wrote quickly. Her father's rage, the bounty, the killers searching for Rune and his people. She begged him to run, to take the Ashwind kin and disappear before it was too late. Vanish deeper into the mountains, far beyond the reach of her father's men, into places where the land itself would shield him, where he and the Ashwind kin might survive. "Thank you," Marabel Crow whispered, pressing the folded note into Orrin Pike's rough hands, tears streaking her cheeks. "You're risking everything for this." Orrin gave a small, sad smile, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know what it means to love someone the world says you can't have, Miss Marabel. I had a wife once, before I was freed. Her owner sold her south, and I never saw her again. If helping you keeps your love alive, then maybe something good comes from what I lost." True to his word, Orrin rode out before dawn. Using careful tracking and questions asked only in the right places, he found Rune's camp. He delivered Marabel's message, then returned before anyone at the ranch noticed he'd been gone. Rune read Marabel's words with a rising storm of fury and helplessness. She was a prisoner in her own home. Halric Crow had placed a bounty on his head. Professional killers were already moving, hunting him and everyone under his protection. The Ashwind kin gathered close as Rune shared the letter. "We must flee," Jain said at once, his scarred face set with resolve. "Take the band deeper into the mountains where white men cannot follow. Let the land defend us." "It is the only choice," others agreed, already discussing routes, passes, and hiding places only they truly knew. But Rune remained silent, staring at Marabel's handwriting, at the blurred ink where her tears had fallen. And with a certainty that cut deeper than any blade, he knew he could not obey logic. "I am going to take her," he said at last, his voice slicing through the murmurs. The camp fell still. "Brother," Jain said carefully, stepping closer, "that is madness. They will expect it. It will be a trap, and you will die before you reach the house. Then I will break the trap," Rune replied calmly, though his fists were clenched tight. "And I will bring her back." "I know, You will die," Jain snapped, gripping his shoulders. "For what? For a woman you cannot keep? What happens to our people when you're gone?" The question hung heavy. Duty warred with love inside Rune's chest. "I have given everything to our people," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "My youth, my dreams, my life. But Marabel is my heart, and a man cannot live without his heart." He looked around at the warriors who had followed him through fire and famine. "I will not command anyone to come. This is my choice alone. But if any of you believe in love, if any of you know what it means to find your other half, help me bring her home." Silence stretched tight as a drawn bow. Then Jain stepped forward, a grim smile cutting across his scarred face. "You're a fool," he said bluntly, "a complete one. But you're my brother, and I won't let you die alone." One by one, others joined them. Not all. Some had families they could not abandon. But 8 men, including Jain, pledged themselves to Rune's cause. They planned the impossible. 5 nights later, under a moonless sky thick with darkness, the rescue began. Rune and his warriors moved toward the Crow Ranch like shadows, patient and silent. Guards were avoided, patterns studied, weaknesses found. Orrin Pike's information proved vital: Marabel's room, the patrol routes, the narrow windows where escape might be possible. Even with all of it, the odds were terrible. But Rune had beaten impossible odds before. He climbed alone to Marabel's window, his heart pounding harder than from the effort alone. When he tapped softly on the glass, her face appeared beyond the bars. And in that instant, despair vanished, replaced by pure relief and shining hope. Even through iron and darkness, Rune saw it. And he knew he had made the only choice he ever could. She tried to speak, but Rune lifted a finger to his lips, warning her into silence. Guards were close, and even the smallest sound could bring them down on both of them. "Stand back," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper in the heavy night. He went to work on the iron bars with his knife, easing the blade into the crumbling mortar and prying with painstaking care. The mortar was old, weakened by years of wind and freezing winters, but each movement demanded endless patience. Every scrape of metal against stone sounded thunderous in the stillness. Each passing second carried the threat of discovery, footsteps, a shout, an alarm that would end everything. 15 minutes crawled by, then 20. Sweat slid down Rune's spine despite the cold, his muscles burning from the strain and the awkward angle. At last, mercifully, the bars loosened and came free. Rune slipped through the window and was instantly wrapped in Marabel Crow's arms. She clung to him, trembling, tears soaking into his buckskin shirt. "I thought I'd never see you again," she sobbed softly against his chest. "I thought my father would kill you. I thought I'd be trapped here forever, that everything we had was just a dream I'd remember while living a nightmare." "I told you I would tear worlds apart to keep you," Rune murmured into her hair, breathing her in, feeling whole for the first time since reading her desperate letter. "Did you think I meant it lightly?" Marabel laughed through her tears, a sound bright with disbelief and joy. "You came for me. You really came for me." "Always," he promised, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. "I will always come for you. Now we have to move, quietly and fast. Can you do that?" She nodded, fear sharpened into resolve. Rune helped her through the window and down the rope he had secured. His hands were steady, though he knew luck could shatter at any moment. Below, his warriors waited in shadow, eyes sweeping the darkness. When Marabel's boots touched the ground, Rune took her hand, and they moved swiftly toward the edge of the property. They were nearly to the tree line, nearly safe, when a shout ripped through the night. "There! They're escaping! Sound the alarm!" Gunfire cracked like thunder. Chaos exploded across the ranch. Lamps flared in windows. Men yelled. Horses screamed. Dogs erupted into furious barking. What had been a silent rescue became a desperate flight. "Go!" Rune shouted to the Ashwind kin. "To the horses! Get her clear!" But Marabel refused to release his hand. They ran together through darkness, bullets whining past like hornets, shouts and pounding boots closing in behind them. Rune's horse waited at the planned point. He swung Marabel up in front of him and drove the animal into a hard gallop. Behind them, pursuit thundered to life. But Rune knew this land as the ranchmen never could. He led them through knife-thin passes, across frozen streams that swallowed tracks, over ground that turned pursuit into madness. They rode without stopping, pushing through the night until the chase finally broke off. No ranch hand willing to die in mountain darkness. At dawn, when the rising sun painted the peaks in rose and gold, They reached Rune's high camp. Marabel was exhausted, hands raw from gripping the saddle, body aching from fear and flight. But she was free. She was with Rune. Nothing else mattered. The band greeted them with relief mixed with caution. Marabel saw it in their eyes. Not hatred, but wariness. She was the daughter of their enemy, a woman from the world that hunted them. Her presence meant danger. Rune faced them, calm and unyielding, his arm around Marabel's shoulders. Protective, unmistakable. "This is Marabel," he said, his voice carrying through the camp. "She is under my protection. She has left her world for me. She has risked everything for our love." He held their gaze. "If anyone challenges that, if anyone questions my choice, speak now." No one did. The silence that followed was thoughtful, not hostile. At last, Jane stepped forward and dipped his head slightly, respect softening his scarred face. "You are welcome here," he said in careful English. "Any woman who risks everything for love deserves respect and protection. You are one of us now." Tears stung Marabel's eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered. Rune led her to his shelter, a dwelling built against the mountain stone, simple, warm, solid. He fed the fire until heat filled the space, wrapped her in furs, then examined her carefully. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands gentle as they checked for injuries. "Just bruises," she said softly. Her lip was still swollen from Halric Crow's strike, and dark marks bloomed on her arms where the iron spurmen had held her. Rune's jaw tightened as he saw them, but his touch remained tender, reverent, as though she were something precious he had fought the world to save. Nothing serious, nothing that won't heal. Rune touched her split lip with infinite care, his jaw tightening as a quiet, dangerous fury stirred at the proof of Halric Crow's violence. "I should kill him for laying hands on you," he said low, controlled, "for striking you in anger." "No," Marabel Crow answered firmly, catching his hand and pressing it to her cheek. "Enough blood has been spilled because of me. I won't have you become a killer for my sake. I just want to be here, with you. I want us to figure out how to build a life together." Rune drew her closer, pulling the furs around them as they sat before the fire, holding each other as if letting go might shatter them both, as if they could somehow fuse into one if they held tight enough. "What happens now?" Marabel asked softly, her words muffled against his chest. "I don't know," Rune admitted, fingers stroking her hair in absent tenderness. "Your father won't stop searching. He'll use every coin and favor he has. He'll hire every gun in the territory if he must. And my people—" He paused, choosing his words. "They accepted you tonight because I left them no choice, because they trust me. But they're afraid, Marabel. Afraid I'm putting love ahead of their safety. Afraid your father's wrath will fall on all of us." "Are you?" she asked quietly. He was silent for a long moment, his breathing slow and steady beneath her cheek. "Perhaps," he said at last. "But I also believe— No, I have to believe. There's a way for us to survive together. A way for our peoples to find peace instead of endless war. Maybe we can be the beginning of that. Maybe our love can open a door to a different future." Marabel wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe their love could change the world, could bridge the gulf carved by hatred and blood. She had seen the cruelty in her father's eyes, the casual savagery of the iron spur men, heard stories of massacres and broken promises stretching back generations. Still, in Rune's arms, watching firelight dance and feeling safer than she ever had in her father's grand house, she let herself hope. If love couldn't change the world, maybe it could carve out a small corner where they could live. Winter deepened, yet Marabel found she didn't mind the cold when she was with Rune. Life in the camp was harder than anything she'd known. There were no servants, No soft beds, no comforts. She learned to cook over open fires, mend clothing with bone needles and sinew, do work she'd once believed beneath her. The women were wary at first, and she couldn't blame them. She was the daughter of a man who had taken their land and spilled their blood. But they watched her work without complaint, saw her willingness to learn, her love for Rune, and slowly their suspicion eased. An older woman named Ishra, her face etched by years of hardship but her eyes kind, took Marabel under her wing. Ishra taught her the language with patient repetition, showed her customs and ways of surviving in unforgiving country, shared stories of the time before the settlers came in overwhelming numbers. Rune watched Marabel change with a pride and love so sharp it nearly hurt. She was like a plant kept too long in a small pot, roots bound, growth stunted. Now, with space to breathe, she bloomed. She laughed more, smiled more, shed the weight of expectations that had caged her all her life. Yet the threat of her father hung over them like a storm on the horizon. Halric Crow raised the bounty on Rune to a staggering sum and added another reward for any word of Marabel's whereabouts. Hunters scoured the mountains with grim purpose, making movement and hunting increasingly dangerous for the Ashwind kin. One night, wrapped in Rune's arms, Marabel finally voiced the fear that had haunted her. Will we ever stop running? Will there ever be a day we're not waiting for my father's men to find us? Rune's fingers moved gently through her hair. Not here, he said honestly. Your father's reach is too long, his hunger for revenge too strong. Sooner or later he'll find us. He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Then what do we do? She asked, forcing her voice steady. We leave, Rune said simply. We go north, beyond where your father's power can reach so easily. We build a life without looking over our shoulders every day, without waking to fear. Marabel sat up, studying his face in the firelight. What about your people? You're their leader. They need you. I've spoken with the Stonebound, Rune replied. Some will come, those tired of war who want peace. Others will stay and choose their own path. Jayan has agreed to lead those who remain. He's wise, strong, better suited to it than I ever was. They'll be safe with him. He met her gaze, steady and sure. And we will be free. You would give up everything for me? The question slipped out barely above a breath. Rune lifted Marabel Crow's face in his hands, his eyes burning with a depth of love that stole the air from her lungs. You are not taking me away from my life, he said softly. You are giving me a new one I never believed possible. With you, I can imagine a future beyond endless war and constant struggle. With you, I can dream of peace, of children who grow up without fear. You are not a burden. You are my salvation. Tears streamed down Marabel's cheeks, emotion sealing her throat. She answered the only way she could, by kissing him, pouring into that kiss everything she couldn't say: gratitude, devotion, hope, and love. That night, they came together for the first time, passion shaped by tenderness, desire guided by trust. In Rune's arms, Marabel felt whole, as if a missing piece of herself had finally been found. Afterward, tangled beneath warm furs, Rune made her a promise he intended to spend his life keeping. When we reach the northern territories, he murmured in the dark, I will build you a home. Not grand like Halric Crow's mansion, just strong and safe, a place that is truly ours. We'll fill it with laughter and love until the walls themselves seem to glow. Marabel smiled against his chest. Children? Many, Rune said with quiet certainty. Little ones with your golden hair and blue eyes, running free through the mountains, speaking both our tongues, belonging to both our worlds. Or with your dark eyes and fierce spirit, she countered, tracing slow patterns over his heart. Both, he decided. They will be the bridge between worlds, proof that love can create something new from what once seemed forever divided. They left 2 weeks later, as soon as the weather allowed safe passage. Rune, Marabel, and 23 others who chose to follow them began the long journey north, toward a land that promised freedom. They traveled carefully, skirting settlements and soldiers, moving through country that grew wilder and more breathtaking with each passing mile. The journey took nearly 4 months, carrying them from the last bite of winter into the green promise of early summer. There were hardships, illness, injuries, dangerous river crossings, and tense encounters with groups who didn't welcome strangers. But there were wonders, too. Valleys carpeted in wildflowers, peaks that seemed to scrape the sky, forests so dense they felt like living cathedrals. Marabel learned more in those months than in all her years of schooling. How to read the land, find water, recognize plants that could heal or nourish. She learned the rhythms of traveling together, the strength born of shared hardship. Through it all, Rune stayed at her side, teaching, protecting, loving her with a steadiness that never faltered. At last, in late summer, they reached a remote northern valley where mountains stood like ancient guardians and streams ran cold and clear. It was far enough from the reach of old enemies to promise peace, yet fertile enough to sustain them. The nearest white settlement lay 3 days away, close enough for trade, distant enough for safety. It was home. They built their dwelling together, log by log, stone by stone, simple, sturdy, warmed by a broad hearth and windows that opened to the valley. That autumn, Marabel planted a garden, coaxing life from rocky soil with patient determination. Rune hunted and trapped, trading pelts with the rare traveler for what they couldn't make themselves. They were married the first winter's snowfall, under a sky sharp with stars, surrounded by friends who had become family. Ishra helped Marabel sew her dress, beadwork stitched with months of care. Rune wore his finest buckskins, hair braided with feathers and beads. When they spoke their vows, promising to honor and protect one another through whatever came, Marabel felt a joy so deep it seemed to shine from her very bones. It was nothing like the wedding her father had planned. It was better. A union of souls, blessed by mountains, stars, and the love that had carried them there. Their first year wasn't easy. Isolation weighed on them at times. Work never ended. Winters were brutal. Marabel sometimes missed the comforts she'd known, but each night she fell asleep in Rune's arms, and each morning she woke to his smile. That was worth more than any luxury. In the spring of their second year, Marabel discovered she was with child. The news filled Rune with a joy he hadn't known he was capable of. He grew even more attentive, bringing her special foods, urging her to rest, speaking softly to her growing belly as if the child could already hear him. Marabel listened to him and truly heard the weight of his promises. Love that sheltered, protection that never smothered. "You're going to be a wonderful father," she told Rune one evening as they sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the sun bleed into the horizon, the sky washed in amber, violet, and gold. "I hope so," Rune said, his palm warm against her belly, feeling the steady flutter of life beneath his hand. "I want to give our children everything, love, safety, and the freedom to become whoever they choose. I want them to grow up knowing both their legacies, proud of both their peoples, never forced to choose between halves of themselves." "They will," Marabel said, covering his hand with hers, "because they'll have you as their father, and a mother who'll stand against anyone who tells them they don't belong." Their daughter arrived in early spring, during a soft snowfall that reminded Marabel of the day she and Rune first crossed paths. The labor was long and punishing, guided by Ishra and two seasoned women who knew the old ways by heart. When Marabel finally held her child, the pain dissolved, replaced by a love so fierce it left her trembling. The baby had Rune's dark eyes and Marabel's golden hair, a living union of two worlds, just as they had dreamed. They named her Sael, a name meaning eternal blossom. When Rune held his daughter for the first time, tears tracked down his face, joy, gratitude, awe all tangled together at the miracle in his arms. "She's perfect," he breathed. "She's ours," Marabel said, smiling through her own tears. "The first of many, if you meant what you said about filling this house with children." "I meant every word," Rune promised, kissing Marabel's brow, then their daughter's tiny crown. "This house will overflow, with laughter, with love." 2 years later, a son was born, strong and bright-eyed, with a laugh that chased shadows away. They named him Rook, and he lived up to the name, restless and fearless as a sparrowhawk. Their home filled with the music of children, the warmth of belonging, the kind of love that reshapes everything it touches. Rune taught the children reverence for the land, pride in their Apache roots, and their mother's English heritage alike. Marabel taught them letters and stories, sharing the books she'd carried north from her old life, opening doors to worlds both real and imagined. The small community they'd planted took root and grew. Apache families fleeing confinement, people once enslaved searching for a place to breathe free, white settlers who never fit tidy lines. Each arrived with the same hope: peace, acceptance, a life without judgment. What bound them together was the promise of belonging. Jayan visited now and then, bringing word from the south. The Ashwind kin endured, adapting, preserving what mattered, surviving the churn of a changing world. He always left smiling, relieved to see his friends grounded and whole. On their 10th anniversary, Marabel rested her head on Rune's shoulder as they watched Sael and Rook race through the meadow with the younger ones. 3 more now, Nira, Vea, and Tarn. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Stepping away from leadership? Leaving your people behind? Everything you gave up for me?" Rune was quiet, eyes following the children as their laughter drifted on the warm air. "I traded one life for another," he said at last, pulling her closer. "War for peace, loneliness for love, surviving for truly living. How could I regret that?" "But you were born to lead," Marabel said. "I am leading," Rune replied, gesturing towards the valley, the children, the homes, the lives woven together. "I'm leading toward a future where Apache and White live as one family, where love outpaces hatred, where acceptance matters more than fear. That is greater leadership than any I could have claimed through war." Marabel kissed him, tasting the salt of shared tears. "I love you." "I will love you beyond my last breath," Rune vowed, cupping her face with the same tenderness he'd shown the first time he touched her in a snowy clearing years ago. "Our love will live on, in our children and theirs, and all who come after. We started something here, Marabel, something that lasts." As the sun sank behind the mountains, the sky burning crimson and gold, the children came running, calling out about birds spotted, flowers gathered, adventures invented. Rune scooped Sael into the air, laughing, while Marabel drew Rook close as Nira, Vea, and Tarn tumbled around them like a joyful storm. They were a family, Apache and English, warrior and rancher's daughter, 2 people who should never have met, yet found in each other everything they were missing. In the years that followed, more children arrived, each different, each cherished beyond measure. Their home rang with life and learning. Marabel taught them to read and think, to question and imagine. Rune taught them to endure the wild, to honor the earth, to be strong and kind in equal measure. They grew up fluent in both tongues, rooted in both traditions, belonging fully to neither world and completely to both. They stood as living proof that the line between peoples was never unbreakable, that love could shape something new and radiant from lives once kept apart. When Sael turned 16, a young man from a family of trappers living 3 valleys away fell hopelessly in love with her. Rune watched the two of them together and felt a familiar ache in his chest. In their shy glances and unspoken pull, he saw echoes of his own youth, of that first impossible bond with Marabel. "She reminds me of you," he said quietly as they stood apart, watching Sael laugh at something the young man whispered, her joy lighting her face. "She has your fire," Marabel replied, slipping her hand into his as easily as breathing. "And your certainty. Once she knows what she wants, nothing will turn her away." When the young man came forward to ask for Sael's hand, Rune gave his blessing without hesitation. In the boy's eyes, he recognized the same devotion that had once driven him to risk everything for Marabel. The celebration that followed drew people from every corner of their world. Families of the Ashwind kin, freed men and women, white settlers, trappers, traders, even a few from neighboring territories. It became a true blending of cultures, the living continuation of what Rune and Marabel had begun decades earlier. As Rune watched his daughter stand radiant in her vows, her joy mirroring Marabel's on their own wedding day, he felt his wife's hand tighten in his. "We did it," she whispered, emotion thick in her voice. "We proved love can cross any divide." "We proved even more than that," Rune answered, never taking his eyes off Sael. "We proved that 2 people willing to risk everything for each other can change the world, one family at a time, one generation at a time." And they had. Their children and grandchildren spread across the territories, carrying with them a legacy untouched by hatred or prejudice. They became healers and teachers, leaders and peacemakers, people who understood that the world was stronger for its differences, that unity bred resilience, and that love was always worth the cost. Rune and Marabel grew old together in the home they had raised with their own hands, their hair silvered, their steps slowed, but their bond never thinned. If anything, it deepened, rooted in shared hardship, shared joy, the family they had built, and the community they had nurtured. On a soft spring morning, when Marabel was 71 and Rune 76, they sat side by side on the porch of their expanded home, watching great-grandchildren race through the same meadow where their own children once played. "I've had a good life," Marabel said, her hand resting in his, fingers woven together as they had been for more than 50 years. "The best life," Rune agreed, his thumb brushing her knuckles in a motion worn smooth by time. "Far better than anything I could have imagined when I was only a warrior trying to keep his people alive." "I love you," she said, no less powerful than the first time the words crossed her lips in a snowy clearing long ago. "And I love you," Rune replied, lifting her hand to his mouth, just as he had so many years before. Always, forever. They sat in peaceful silence as the sun climbed higher. Around them, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the wider circle shaped by their vision carried on the legacy they had begun. A legacy of love that outlasted hate, of hope stronger than despair, proof that sometimes the heart knows where it belongs from the very first glance. For Rune and Marabel, it had been that way from the moment their eyes met in the snow, across lines drawn by violence and fear. One look had altered the course of their lives, setting loose a story that would echo through generations. They had begun as enemies and become soulmates, risked everything, and gained more than they ever dreamed. They proved that love, true, fierce, unyielding love, could tear old worlds apart and then build something far better in their place. And now, dear listener, there is a quieter moment in this story that lingers longer than the rescues or vows. It's when Marabel, raised among silk and comfort, learns to stitch buckskin with unsteady hands. When she presses seeds into rocky soil, unsure anything will grow. When she speaks her first careful words in Apache, and the women finally smile. She began again at an age when the world insists lives are already decided. Maybe that's why this story found you. Maybe you know what it means when life demands you become someone new. Not by choice, but because everything familiar has fallen away. Starting over is not failure. It is courage. Marabel didn't merely survive among the Ashwind kin. She discovered strength her father's house had hidden, joy she had never been allowed to claim, a wildness that waited patiently to breathe. That same wildness lives in you. It does not fade with age, loss, or disappointment. Maybe it has been quiet so long you forgot it was there. Maybe you learned to shrink yourself, to apologize for wanting, for feeling. But it remains. Waiting. Rune and Marabel didn't ride north with a plan. They carried love, yes, but also fear, doubt, and the suspicion they might be wrong. They built their life one choice at a time, one log set into place, one dawn survived together, one beam fitted into the house, one seed pressed into stubborn soil, one gentle word offered to a neighbor who began as a stranger, one morning of waking up and choosing to try again. That is all any of us can ever do, and it has always been enough. You've lived long enough to know life doesn't hand us a perfect ending in a single shining moment. The love that endures is built quietly, through hundreds of ordinary choices, choosing each other, choosing hope, choosing to believe tomorrow might be kinder than today. And you've been doing that all along, haven't you? Each morning you opened your eyes despite the weight of grief. Each kindness you offered while your own heart was cracked. Each smile you found when the world gave you every reason to quit. Each night you whispered a prayer or a hope into the dark, even when you weren't sure anyone was listening. That is your love story, not the one you expected, not the one you planned when the future felt endless, but a real one, a true one, a story of a soul that refused to let bitterness win, that chose gentleness in a hard world, that kept faith with beauty even when beauty seemed impossibly far away. Rune once told Marabel their love would live on through their children and grandchildren, and it did. Generations carried forward the truth that love is stronger than hate, that connection outlasts division. But your love lives on too. It lives in every person you've touched with kindness, in every moment of grace you offered to a world that didn't always deserve it, in the quiet way you showed others how to endure, how to hope, how to keep moving when everything said stop. You are someone's Rune, someone's Marabel, the one who proved that impossible things can happen, that hearts can heal, that it's never too late to choose love over fear. So tonight, let go of the burden of perfection, release the weight of regret, silence the harsh voice that says you should have done more, been more, achieved more. You are exactly who you were meant to be. Scarred, yes. Weathered by storms, absolutely. And beautiful in the ways only depth and time can create. Beautiful in your resilience, beautiful in your tenderness, beautiful in your refusal to let life make you cruel. Close your eyes now, dear one. Let your body sink into rest. Loosen your grip on tomorrow's worries. You are safe. You are loved. You are enough. And when morning comes, and it will, you'll rise again, Not because you must, not because anyone is watching, but because that is what warriors do. That is what survivors do. That is what souls filled with quiet, stubborn, magnificent love do. Sleep deeply. Dream gently. Tomorrow can wait. Tonight is for rest. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: the stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.